been almost 3 years since 18-year-old Lauren Astley was murdered by her one-time boyfriend, Nathaniel Fujita, who is now serving a life sentence for first-degree murder. Since then, Lauren's father, Malcolm, and her mother, Mary Dunne, have spoken in schools around the state, getting out the message about dating violence. Lauren Astley and Nathaniel Fujita had just recently graduated from Wayland High School. They had dated throughout the year, but Lauren called the romance off. Still, Fujita persisted, texting her about getting together the night of July 3, 2011. Lauren agreed to meet him and texted around 7:45 that she was here. It was the last communication she made. Lauren's body was discovered the next day. Police easily made a trail back to Fujita. Speaking at trial, Lauren's father, Malcolm Astley, was already on a mission to educate teens about dating violence.
We do need to expand our efforts to understand what led to the deeply harmful and tragic act, to take steps to identify needs, vulnerabilities, and shortcomings in our young people, and to address them with determination, education, protection, and caring so as to foster responsibility, mutual respect, and safety, and thus prevent such acts in the future.
And Lauren's mother, Mary Dunne, and her father, Malcolm Astley, are here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, every time I go back and read this story, it's just so heartbreaking, and I know everybody feels the same way, and gives you a great deal of respect for doing what you're doing. I'm wondering how you deal with the particulars of this, because your case was a little bit unique, I think, in that there was not emotional or physical abuse while the relationship was going on. Is that correct?
To our knowledge, there wasn't, and that has led us to this term breakup violence, which seems to be taking on some new meaning, and that it happens after the breakup.
So that is a very specific thing, as opposed to, because there's a lot of abuse that goes on, even in young people's relationships, you know, control and that kind of thing, but the breakup is a new thing. What do you tell young people?
My talks with them try to focus on the need to prepare young people better for the terrible pain of breakups. When we think about it, it's the most painful, the most traumatic event that happens to young people, apart from the death of a loved one or apart from violence in a neighborhood. But the breakup, if you talk with adults about it, you watch their postures droop. It's terribly painful, but we don't provide significant education about it, information about it. Kids have on an average of about 8 breakups before things get serious, but they don't have knowledge about it, they're not prepared for it, and we can do a lot better job. It's part of what our work is with the amendment.
Do you think it's different, Mary, for young people? These were teenagers, as opposed to, I mean, you went through a breakup yourselves. I mean, is it different in terms of the trigger points, do you think? That there's less of a sophisticated ability to deal with it?
Well, I do think that kids are getting involved much younger than they used to.
Sexually and emotionally.
Yeah, and I don't think that parents and schools and churches, even though they try, I don't think we do a good relationship education. It's kind of like the same thing. We don't do great financial.
Nothing.
Right? So it's one of those places that we do fall down. But one of the things I wanted to respond to, the question you asked Malcolm, was that, what do you tell people? And I have to say, because it was breakup violence, Lauren was not afraid of him. And so my message always is, do not go alone. If you are, you have to be in public if you're going to go alone, especially if the other person hasn't wanted the breakup, because she somewhat walked into it because she wasn't fearful of him. So to avoid it, I can say there were things that I saw, but really the one thing that probably would have maybe prevented it was her not going alone that night.
You know, Malcolm, schools are asked to do a lot, and more now, you know, sorting out kids with, you know, ADD and bullying issues and all of that. Is it really more the responsibility of people like you to take it on, rather, because, I mean, you can't really force the schools to do it. And I know you're going to get some grants and you've got some possibilities for how to get some programs going, but can the schools really deal with it?
Communities need to deal with it, and the schools, as being part of communities, need to deal with it. DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, has published a good set of guidelines on teen dating violence. On page 9 are about 20 factors, indicators of potential perpetrators. Number 1 on the list, low self-esteem.
Oh.
Now, whether that's by chance or not, I don't know.
Didn't he have high self-esteem? He was like a star athlete. And
See, that's often part of the trick of it, and this is complicated, but you can get anchor points within the discussion. Our young men today are being groomed never to lose. And if you lose, you're known as a loser. You're worried about being a loser. There's a great deal of shame about that. And on top of it, there's a shame of shame. And so they seal over. And they're very inaccessible to working on what's going on inside. The gender role for both males and females is much more narrow than it should be. And for males in particular, they're not at ease in talking about what's going on inside. They don't have places to do it. They're concerned about saying effeminate or gay if they are talking about those things. So you package those things together, and there's isolation and a tremendous aversion to rejection, potentially, in numbers of men. And the breakup violence is part of that. It arises out of tremendous pain and shame and
I imagine
violence.
some girls feel it too, right?
Yes.
Well, ironically, girls who are in abusive relationships are often characterized as having low self-esteem, and that can be true, but it certainly wasn't true in Lauren's case. So I find it ironic that it's actually the perpetrator with the low self-esteem and not the person who's having the difficulty getting out.
I hope you stay on this issue, and I know we'll be following it too. Thank you so much,
Thank
both
you.
of you, for coming.